Fenris eats the weak. And every space wolf who wishes to join the Great Company of Frostpaws must first earn his fingers. The wolf priest led the way, and the pups followed. From the halls of the Fang, across the white wastes of Azerheim, and out onto the great frozen sea, they walked. The snow purred with soft, wet crunches under the wolf priest's giant powered armored boots. Despite common traditions, his battle plate was predominantly the same blue-grey as any son of Fenris. His priesthood was represented well, however, for draped across his back and shoulders hung the large and shaggy pelt of a strange animal, its colour as black as night. Clutched in his left hand, he held an ornate yet savage Crozius Arcanum. His heavy power armour was adorned with a collection of wolf tails, runestones, teeth, and bones. All talismans, trinkets, and trophies from past travels and exploits. Hung at his hip, he kept a combat knife sheathed in a black leather scabbard. The right-sided knee plate of his armour was painted black, as were each of his armoured fingers and thumbs. He wore no helmet, a preference shared by very many a space wolf. His orange-red matted hair danced in the wind, the same way flames did on a roaring fire. This was his namesake, Firemane. Floki Firemane. Floki Firemane walked with purpose that day, unconcerned with the disorientating, white-out conditions of the snowstorm around him, and unaffected by the violent gales that sought to off-balance him. The same could not be said, however, about the pups who followed him. They were 4 in number. They were adolescents, neophytes, bloodclaws, still with many trials and stages of genetic transformation yet to come. The icy winds whipped their bare naked bodies mercilessly as they strived to keep their wolf priest in sight. The snowy ground sent flows of cold, throbbing pain through their feet and up into their legs as they fought to keep up with him. They stuck close to each other, their pack bond already strong. They picked each other up when they stumbled or fell. They pulled each other back together when the storm tore them away from each other. The pups felt like they had been walking for hours, and they probably had. Eventually, however, the ferocity of the storm began to calm, and the whiteout conditions started to ease. It was only then that their wolf priest finally stopped. "We are here," he announced. The pups couldn't fathom what made this particular spot so special, and what made it any different to every other foot of this frozen desert. Floki Firemane turned to inspect the pups and spoke to them. "4 of you. Good. It pleases me to see that you didn't leave any of yourselves behind. We are a pack." The largest and oldest of the pups spoke. His hair was jet black, and his fangs unusually long for a bloodclaw. His name was Yuka. Floki looked at him. "Quite right, you are a pack. But sometimes there are things we must do alone. You will meet one of those things today." "What must we do?" The smallest and youngest pup piped up, red-brown of hair and seemingly itching with energy. His name was Timu.
All shall be explained soon, pups. As soon as the Storm Crow gets here.
Floki seemed less than enthusiastic about this.
Who is the Storm Crow?
The third of the pups inquired. Blonde of hair and hooked of nose. His name was Yari.
He's your rune priest. It is regrettably tradition that both wolf and rune priest be present for the pups on this most important day. Well, where is he then?
The pup Timu asked eagerly.
He's where he always is. He is late.
No sooner had Floki finished this remark did the pack feel the cold around them intensify. The harsh cry of a crow's caw echoed through the air, and a figure appeared into view in the storm. The figure wore Terminator battle plate, covered from shoulder to toe with the many runic runes that were etched into it. His long hair and beard were the colour of stone grey. He walked holding an ancient runic force stave, the runes carved into its shaft glowing as white as snow. A bolt pistol and a combat knife, sheathed in a black leather scabbard, both hung at his waist. Perched comfortably upon his shoulder pauldron sat a large crow. Its feathers were as black as ink, and one of its eyes had been bionically augmented. As the rune priest appeared, he spoke. His voice was deep and old. It was strong, and yet gentle as well. There was mystical power in it. It flowed as if carried by the wind itself.
A rune priest is never late, Floki Firemane. Nor is he early. He arrives
Floki cut him off before he could finish.
Precisely when he means to. We've heard it before, Gandir. Hurry up. It's cold even by Fenris standards today. I can feel my gene seed freezing.
A good day to earn one's fingers, then,
the rune priest remarked, coming forward and approaching the pups.
These must be the aspirants.
He studied the 4 naked pups shivering on the ice.
No, they're a mob of orcs I met along the way. They wanted to meet you. I said you wouldn't make much good eating. Not enough meat on your bones, but they insisted.
Fool of a wolf priest,
the storm crow grumbled. Rune priests were typically a stern lot. Gandir extracted a handful of small etched runestones from about his person, and he addressed the pups.
Welcome, aspirants. I am Gandir Stormcrow, rune priest to the Miraz Talapki, the Great Company of Frostpaws, to our Jarl, Mjollnir Thunderhowl, and to you, should you succeed the trials that follow today.
And not to mention a giant pain in my ceramite,
Floki added. Gandir ignored the jest.
Kindly perform your duties, wolf priest.
The semi-augmented crow on his shoulder bossily rasped a harsh caw at Floki. Floki stuck his tongue out at the bird rudely and muttered something about eating it one day.
Pups, choose a knee and kneel.
The 4 pups obeyed the command, each of them dropping a knee to the icy floor. Floki Firemane raised his hand, displaying 5 black power-armored fingers to the pups.
Do you know why we paint our fingers in black?
He bounded ahead, not waiting for a response.
It is because we have earned them. And today, you must do the same. You must honor our Jarl, Mjollnir Thunderhowl. You must honor and heed the very qualities this company was founded upon. For the day our Jarl earned his name, he too earned his fingers.
The pups hung to every word their wolf priest spoke.
It will not surprise you to hear that this will not be easy. arguably suicidal. But always remember, pups, true victory in battle comes not through the outcome of the affair, but during it, in the fight itself, and the qualities you show.
There was a short pause of awe before the pup Timu erupted enthusiastically.
We know no fear. We will gladly give our lives and join the Allfather in his golden hall. I don't want you to be glad about it, pup.
Floki snapped in return.
I want you to curse and fight until your hearts are done pumping. I want you to howl and bite and spit with every fiber of your being. I want you to fight harder, longer, and cleverer than anyone. No matter what they take from you. Your hands, your eyes, your skin, your brothers. Show them that we will not succumb, that we will not go quietly. Show them what it means to be a son of Russ and to be Frostpaw. Your death will be a gift to this Imperium. And yes, pups, we will all join the Allfather in his golden halls someday. But if the Death Wolf Morkai wants to pluck us from this world and take us there, well, he can damn well work for it first.
The pups were silent and in awe. Their chests rose and fell as hot, fiery blood pumped through their veins. Floki Firemane drew a long, slow intake of icy air.
Now show us your resolve. Earn your place amongst this great company. Earn your fingers.
How do we earn them? The blonde pup Yari asked.
First, I am going to take them away from you.
The wolf priest drew a plasma pistol concealed at his side and lowered it down at the icy floor in front of the pups. The pistol was a relic, unlike any other on Fenris. Its plasma charge glowed fiery red. Floki had named the weapon Drakethroat. He squeezed the trigger, and a blazing red-hot flash of superheated matter erupted from the pistol. It melted a great hole in the icy ground, and as the steam dissipated, it revealed a pool of grey icy seawater.
Stormcrow!
Floki barked, calling for the rune priest. Gandia Stormcrow stepped forward towards the hole in the ice and extended his arm. He held 4 small rune stones in the palm of his hand. He uttered something strange under his breath, and the carved runes in the stones began to glow. But not only that, his eyes glowed too, the same icy blue hue as the stones. The wind suddenly seemed to whip stronger, and the cold air seemed to bite harder. The rune priest spoke, his voice now mystical.
Sons of Russ, the tempest calls your name. The web of fate spins your thread. Fenris is home to many a beast, and to each of you one calls today. The beast calls to you, bound by your weird. It waits.
One by one, the rune priest directed his glowing gaze towards each of the pups, and to each of them he spoke a single word.
Kraken, troll, elk, drake.
Gandia's eyes and the stones in the palm of his hand ceased glowing, and Floki took over again.
Pups!
His bark startled them. Floki pointed his Crozius Arcanum down at the pool of the freezing seawater his plasma gun had made in front of them.
It is time, pups. Place your hands in the water, and do not remove them until the frost has bitten so deep that your flesh turns as black as the feathers of that annoying crow.
He sneered at the bird on Gandir's shoulder, and the crow cawed a grumpy rasp back at him. The pups did as they were told, each of them placing both of their hands in the icy depths. The waters sent agonizing rushes of freezing pain through their veins, but they did not remove them.
Now, when you are ready, go into the wild, hunt this beast that calls to you, and bring us back a trophy from it.
Floki called to the blonde pup.
Yari, go west from here, further out into the frozen sea. You will find your Kraken there. Don't try counting its tentacles.
Floki turned to the young red-brown of hair pup next.
Timu, go northeast from here. Where the forest meets the foot of the mountains, you will find caves there, and trolls too. They may be stupid, but they stand taller than a dreadnought and use trees as clubs.
Next, he turned to the large black-haired pup.
Yuka, go northwest, deep into the forest. Many elk dwell there, each with racks of antlers so sharp that they can pierce ceramite.
Finally, Floki turned to the last of the pups, orange of hair and warm of complexion.
Kai, you must go east from here, high into the mountains. There you will find your drake. Be aware, they do breathe fire.
Gandir Stormcrow stepped forwards.
So be it then,
he said, casting the 4 rune stones from his palm into the hole of seawater the pups held their hands in. The pups watched the stones disappear into the icy grey depths, and they shuddered as the cold suddenly seemed to bite their hands harder.
And now, aspirants, while we wait for the frost to sink its fangs and bite your fingers black, we will tell you the saga of which you pay homage to today. It began long ago during a...
What are you doing?
Floki suddenly blurted in interruption.
I am telling the saga.
Yes, you're telling the saga. You know how this works, and yet every time you do this. You are Rune Priest. I am Wolf Priest. You read the runes. I tell the saga.
While I agree that all good stories deserve embellishment, you exaggerate.
I do not. Besides, you are as dull as you are old, Gandir. You read the runes. I tell the saga.
As you say, Firemane.
Floki turned to the pups. He outstretched his arms and took a stance as if he was some kind of artist about to commence a performance.
Pups, listen closely. Hear me now. Hear tell of the deeds we honor today. Hear now the saga of the Thunder Howl.
Mjollnir was dreaming. It was a dream unlike any he had had before, yet one he would indeed have many times again. He was a wolf, hunched on all fours, his fur thick, his breath hot. The metallic taste of blood heavy on his tongue. The pungent smell of death strong on his nose. He stood amidst a vast landscape painted white with snow. In the distance, icy mountains framed a great barren valley that folded over the horizon. Wild birds and beasts, great and small, lay littered across the valley. All were either dead or dying. The creatures had been twisted painfully by sickness and disease. Trees withered on their roots, the leaves turned to rotten pulp before his eyes. Even the rocks and stones seemed corrupted, with foul ichor oozing from their cracked and crumbling structures. He heard the whimper of a canine's whine at his side. His pack was here with him. Wolves, all of them too. They were sick. They were starving. They were exhausted. They looked to him for reassurance, but he could offer none. Suddenly, the pack's whimpers turned to low, guttural growls, signalling an incoming threat. Mjollnir whipped his attention towards it. Far ahead, across the entire stretch of the horizon, the water came. A terrifying and violent tidal wave cascading down into the valley, sweeping away all in its path. The wolves' weak and trembling legs held them up as they stood their ground. They growled harder and fiercer as the water drew closer and closer. And then, as each of them met it with the snarl of a gnashing maw, the torrent took them. The pack was swallowed up into the rising tide, and within an instant, Mjollnir found himself engulfed in an ocean. He hung immobile and suspended, floating in the gloomy, watery depths. Below him, a fathomless abyss, and above him, no surface could be seen. There was nothing but water. He tore his gaze to his left and to his right, but only to see the lifeless, stiff husks of the wolves around him. The fur of their bodies swayed eerily within the water. Their wide, cloudy yellow eyes echoed the sadness and harrowing pain of their deaths. Mjollnir looked ahead and was met by a face appearing out of the gloom before him. A face that morphed and grew massively, the face of a wolf. But no, not just a wolf, it was the face of a deity, of a god. Eyes glowing red as fresh crimson blood, fur as black as the void of space, fangs as long as spears. It called to him, speaking his name. Mjollnir. The death wolf had come for him, come to take him, to cut his thread. Mjollnir thrashed and flailed against the liquid prison of the ocean that engulfed him, but still he could not move. The black and gaping maw of the jaws of Mordkai yawned open to swallow him whole, and Mjollnir spat through the choking agony of waterlogged lungs the only 2 words he knew to say to the face of death itself.
Not today!
Mjollnir awoke from his dream. The bright rays of the winter sun beamed through the forest canopy above him and flooded his eyes as they flickered open. His mind ignited, jumping from one thought to the next. First was the cold. Second, the pain. And third, his pack. His pack. he thought again. The last thing he had seen before he'd blacked out had been their deaths. It was by the twisted threads of fate, or perhaps merely sheer luck alone, that he was still alive. There had been an attack. The Drukhari had come to Fenris, the Dark Eldar. They'd slithered onto the planet under the cover of the Hell Winter. They came for the same reason they went anywhere. They were raiders, pirates, torturers. They came to capture slaves and beasts, to serve and amuse them in their fighting pits on Komorra. They came for victims, to be subjugated to the very worst kinds of fates, little more than toys and nourishment for their endless depravities. They never stayed anywhere long. The rout had responded, and by now, the Drukhari were either dead or gone. Mjollnir and his pack had not known of their arrival, and the only time they saw them was when the Razorwing swooshed overhead, covering the raid's retreat. He and his pack were Bloodclaws. They had been scouting, hunting, honing their skills. Mjollnir had been positioned a little further ahead of the pack, examining the tracks of an animal, and so he did not feel the full impact of the Shatterfield missile that decimated his brothers. The space wolves of Fenris were not unaccustomed to weaponizing ice by any means, be that through blades or sub-zero energy beams. Yet everything about the Dark Eldar held a more sinister nature, and a particular signature of horror. The Shatterfield missile had found its mark perfectly. The missile detonated twice. The first, unleashing an energy field that plummeted the surrounding temperature and absorbed the heat from any living matter within it. Anybody caught in its field would be frozen, their bodies turned to a haunting parody that resembled statues made of glass. The second detonation would simply send a powerful explosive shockwave, designed to shatter the statues into 1,000 pieces. When the missile hit, Mjollnir felt the freezing cold gnaw and bite through the plate of his scout armor, and then he felt his ribs break as he was thrown backwards and knocked unconscious. And now, so he woke. His scout armor coated with a layer of frost, his arms and face burnt with ice, his broken ribs screaming at him from within his torso. He drew a slow, heavy, painful breath and rolled onto his knees and forearms. The tender burns on his arms sizzled as they kissed the wet snow. Something felt wrong with his hands. They were stubborn and rigid. He removed both of his armoured gloves, a task that was far more of a struggle than it ought to have been. He examined his hands, and what he saw was neither a welcome nor a pleasant sight. His fingers and thumbs were swollen and sore with blisters, and they were as black as ink. They were useless. He had avoided death, yet the frost of the Shatterfield missile had bitten him deeper than even the storms of Fenris had ever done. "Not today," he muttered to himself, suddenly remembering the dream he had woken from. It was unlike any dream he had had before. It meant something, he was sure, but he couldn't fathom what. The marks of fate and of weirds presented themselves in strange ways.
Questions for seers and wolf and rune priests,
he thought to himself. His mind suddenly cast itself back to his fallen packmates, and he cast all thoughts of dreams and of weirds far aside. He rose to his feet and staggered the short, painful walk over to where his pack had been. The air was colder here. He trudged closer, and the still, eerie quiet was disturbed by a sharp crunch from beneath his boot. Thousands of tiny, icy glass-like pieces lay scattered across the ground. Mjollnir had witnessed the impact of the Xenos missile, and he needed no explanation as to what he had just stood upon. A medley of grief, guilt, and rage punched him in the stomach. Mjollnir had always had a big voice, and he wanted to exercise that now. He wanted to howl so loud his fallen brothers would hear him call to them as they feasted in the All-Father's halls. He wanted to scream his fury for the Xenos filth that had taken them from him. He wanted them to hear, even as they festered within their cursed home, that Mjollnir of the Space Wolves would come for them, and he would rip them limb from limb. But for all that grief and rage, through black fingers, burns, and broken bones, he merely managed to drop to one knee and solemnly spoke to the shards of his slaughtered brothers.
Be at peace, sons of Fenris.
Mjollnir rose back to his feet, wincing as he did. Suddenly, something changed. Something was wrong. The hairs on his spine stood up and his transhuman senses heightened keenly. His blood pumped hot, the kill urge in him rising. There was a scent on the air, the feeling of eyes upon him. He was being watched. He was being hunted. And then he heard it. The fast and pounding gallop of heavy feet sounded from behind him. Mjollnir spun around to face the incoming threat. Charging at him, full throttle, was a great white Fenrisian bear. The bear was huge, as tall and as wide as a dreadnought. Its snowy fur gleamed in the sun. Its growling maw opened as it charged, displaying canine teeth as long as daggers. The bear was too quick. It smashed into Mjollnir, sending him flying. He crashed into a tree and hit the forest floor. His broken ribs screamed at him. The bear was on top of him now, its breath hot and stinking. It dragged and shook him wildly. Mjolnir's scout armor offered him little protection against the fury of the beast. He felt his skin split when the bear's teeth snagged him. He felt his flesh tear when it scraped its claws against him. Mjollnir howled and thrashed against the creature, landing what little blows he could. He made to claw at the bear's eyes, but his black frozen fingers were useless. Mjollnir drove his elbows and knees up into the bear and launched himself downwards, further beneath it. He sank his fangs as hard as he possibly could into its soft underbelly, and he tore at it until he tasted blood. The bear yelped and lifted itself up and away from the pain. This was his moment. Mjollnir seized his opportunity and rolled sideways, out from beneath the bear's embrace. He shot to his knees and darted between the narrow gap of two trees. The bear came again, clawing at Mjolnir's back as it reached after him. But a few seconds was all Mjollnir needed to escape the beast's hungry clutches. And he ran, as fast as his superhuman legs could carry him. Mjollnir knew he could never outrun the bear, but he had to gain some kind of advantage. So he used the narrow clusters of trees to slow the bear's pursuit. Then there, not 50 yards away, was a bank, a shallow slope at the edge of a frozen lake. He hit the bank and slid down, the bear hot on his heels. Mjollnir didn't see the half-eaten cadaver of the elk as he slid down the bank, not until a piece of its broken antler skewered his leg. Mjollnir felt skin pierce. He felt muscle and sinew rip. He roared with pain, but knew that he couldn't waste even a second. So he worked quickly, Taking the piece of broken antler between the palms of his hands, he yanked it out of his leg. Blood poured from the wound, staining the snow red. The bear was right behind him again, clambering down the slope. Mjollnir took the piece of broken antler that had skewered him, and he span to meet the bear. He drove the sharp tines into its face as it smashed into him again. Mjollnir lost his purchase on the antlers and was sent sliding across the frozen lake. A moment's rest at last. The bear remained at the edge of the lake, whimpering at the pain of its slashed and bloody face. Mjollnir lay on his back, staring up at the sky. His eyes were blurring. He may be a space marine, an Adeptus Astartes, a marvel of creation, but even the Emperor's finest had their limits. He could feel the life draining from him. It would be so easy to close his eyes and let go. Would this be a fitting end to his saga? Fighting tooth and claw against the wilds of Fenris? He could join his pack again. He could feast with them and the Allfather tonight. No, he wheezed. His pack had been butchered, decimated by the worst kind of Xenos abomination. They had been robbed of their chance for a glorious death. He must avenge them. He must keep going. He must.
Not today,
he groaned. And then, despite black frozen fingers, frostburnt skin, shattered ribs, torn flesh and skewered limbs, Mjollnir rose to his feet again. The bear stood at the edge of the lake, watching him. Mjollnir wondered if the bear would continue to pursue him, or perhaps settle for the scraps of the elk's cadaver beside it. He hoped for the latter. He called to the bear.
"Begone, beast! You cannot kill me! I am a son of Ras! I am Fulka Fenrica, and we are the wolves that stalk the stars! Swallow us whole, and we will eat our way out of your belly! Begone!"
He didn't know if the bear could understand him, or would listen to him even if it could. The bear considered the scraps of elk at its feet, and for a moment, Mjollnir thought he was in luck. But Fenris was a death world, and death worlds were the wildest of places, the hardest of places, where only the strongest and the cleverest survived. And to a hungry animal, fresh, hot meat was always better than half-frozen scraps. And so, the bear came for him, bounding across the ice, and Mjollnir fled. The icy sheet crunched and gave way beneath the bear's heavy weight, buying Mjollnir enough time to make it to the opposite bank. He clambered up the slope and hobbled through the tree line. And then he stopped. He'd come to a clearing at the foot of the mountains. This had been his escape plan, yet now he was trapped. The forest opening stretched wide across the mountains indeed, but here there was no pass. The rock stretched upwards, straight and vertical. It was more like a cliff face. He would not be able to climb it, not in his condition. The bear was coming. He span round to see it through the trees, reaching the bank of the lake. Mjollnir could not outrun it. He had to think of something. His eyes darted around him, his keen and cunning senses taking in all of his surroundings. Then there, he saw it. The face of the mountain. High above him, an overhang where the rock peaked outwards. Not just rock, but ice and snow also. The bear was here. It came charging through the trees, bloody and furious, a wall of muscle and fur, hungry and raging. Mjollnir stood defiant in the face of his foe. Then, through the seething agony of his tortured body, he erupted from his transhuman lungs a howl so loud it could have rivaled even the mightiest crash of thunder itself. The snows shifted and the mountain broke. The overhang of the cliff face above gave way, crumbling and cracking from the intense volume and shockwave of the howl. The bear faltered in its attack. Mjollnir dived as far as he could out of the way, and his eyes turned to black as the barrage of broken rock and ice collapsed onto the both of them. Mjollnir returned to consciousness, having narrowly avoided death for perhaps the third time this day. He was sure he had broken more bones in his body, for every breath was exhausting. He opened his eyes. He was not alone. Space wolves, clad in full power armor battle plate, stood nearby. Their right arm shoulder pauldrons were marked in black and red. They were grey hunters, seasoned warriors of the rout. As Mjollnir opened his eyes, one of the warriors spoke.
"Odin, the pup is alive!"
They must have dragged him from beneath the debris of rock and ice, for Mjollnir now lay upon soft, clear ground. The pack leader of the Grey Hunters stepped forward to inspect him closer.
Ross's teeth. The last time I saw an Astartes look that worse for wear was when one of those whore sons of the lion tried to cheat me in an honor duel.
Mjollnir managed a word, though his voice undeniably weak.
"Brothers."
Easy, pup. You are gravely wounded. That you are still breathing makes you even the luckiest or most stubborn wolf I have ever met.
Mjollnir knew this warrior, or at least he knew of him. The warrior's head was shaved, but his beard was long and grey and beginning to turn white. He was old, but all that meant was that he was stronger, fiercer, and wiser than most. He carried a melter gun in one hand, and the power axe of a Chaos Space Marine in the other. He was the Red Axe. Odin the Red Axe. Mjollnir knew his Saga. He'd bested a World Eater champion in single combat and had claimed the champion's axe for a trophy. He'd carried it and fought with it ever since.
You are the Red Axe,"
Mjollnir spoke.
Yes, that is me. And what is your name, pup?
"I am Mjollnir. How did you find me?"
How could we not? We heard a howl louder than any of us have heard before. We heard the mountain break and the avalanche that followed. That was you, Mjollnir?
Mjollnir nodded. He glanced over towards the mountain and saw the bear that had hunted him so fiercely. It was dead, lying motionless beneath a blanket of rocky debris.
"The bear tried to make a meal of me. It was all I could do to slay it."
Odin the Red Axe grinned at his warriors.
A broken and frozen bloodclaw with a howl that could still bring down a mountain. Ha! Glorious! Well, do you have a deed name, Mjollnir?
I do not.
Well then, I think we shall call you Thunderhowl. Mjollnir Thunderhowl. Yes, I like it. Has a good ring to it, I think.
Mjollnir didn't know what to say, his heart filled with triumph. Every space wolf sought to carve a saga for themselves, and none felt complete without having earned their own deed name.
You honor me. Thank you.
He spoke gratefully, though still with tremendous pain.
Don't thank me, pup. You've earned it. Now, we really must get you back to the Fang. We'll stitch you up, put your bones back together, and see if the wolf priests can't thaw out those fingers of yours. I'd say you've earned them too. Though first, Mjollnir, where is your pack?
The Xenos. They are dead.
I am sorry, Mjollnir. They feast with the All-Father now.
Then I am to be lone wolf.
Odin chuckled at this.
Ha! You are far too short in the tooth to conform to the path of the lone wolf yet, Thunderhowl. No, there will come a day for vengeance. But for now, we will do what we always do. We will drink to the dead. We will honor our fallen brothers. And tonight, Thunderhowl, you can drink with me and with my pack. You can drink with the Red Axe. And you will have a pack again.
Odin the Red Axe was not wrong. Mjollnir would indeed have a pack again. Odin would in fact take him under his wing, and Mjollnir would climb to the rank of Grey Hunter faster than perhaps any son of Russ had. And one day, the pack of Mjollnir Thunderhowl would be so large that it would be written into the annals as one of the great companies of the Space Wolves. The Great Company of Frostpaws. And every wolf of the company would paint their fingers and a knee plate of their power armor in black, to symbolize the day they knelt upon the ice, and that they too had earned their fingers. They would do this to honor their Jarl. They would do this to honor his resolve. They would do this to honor the saga of the Thunder Howl.